You need the door open?
Good morning, it's December the 2nd, 2015. Welcome to Real Estate Tips. I'm Wayne Russell, instructor, broker associate with RE/MAX Southwest, Sugar Land, Texas. Most of the information that we discuss comes from realtors, newspaper articles, magazines, emails, and from different sources. The material provided here is for information purposes only and is not intended, should not be considered as legal advice for your particular matter. This outline right here, I'm going to talk about changes for Texas realtors, 1 to 4 family residential contract, the residential condominium, unimproved property, third-party financing addendum, notice of buyer's termination of contract, amendment to contract, seller financing, seller's disclosure notice, information about brokerage services, residential listing checklist. By the way, in the last Sunday's Chronicle, there was, I don't know if y'all read the Chuck Jacobus articles, but they're pretty interesting. On Sunday it said that, I'm going to skip to the second question. I'm a real estate salesperson and have heard that there are new contract forms published for the license use. Are they ready to use now? And it said, go to mandatory continuing education for all real estate license holders, MCE. You're no longer a licensee, you are now a license holder. And you're no longer a salesperson, you're now a sales agent. These are new statutory changes in the License Act. New forms were accepted on November the 2nd, 2015 and can be used now. They will become mandatory on January the 1st, 2016. The financing provisions have changed and there are also a new third-party financing addendum. As always, TREC is on top of this, so access their website for copies and have your sponsoring broker and send them out to all sponsored sales agents and brokers. Oh, by the way, if you saved any of your contracts, you know, the templates, you know, in your zip forms, I would suggest deleting all those and starting anew soon. So anyway, the next page is.
Doesn't it automatically update?
No, not the
Not the ones you saved.
Not the templates won't, no.
Not in your
When you do a
templates.
template section.
Do you do templates?
You gotta change those. They'll always stay in there.
No, I'm talking about the actual form.
Yes, they'll change.
Yeah,
But
the form that
if
is
you
in
form
the.
the ones that you saved on the templates, yeah, I would delete all those.
Just, you have to
Okay.
change it in the template.
The update.
Yeah,
The forms automatically update, don't they?
but the ones that you saved, they don't update those.
And any templates you save, like the auto templates, they don't update.
Oh, really? I thought they did.
No, they don't.
No.
So I would delete all the. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, right now, so the changes are from 1 to 4 family, new home contract. We're not going to discuss new home contracts, residential condominiums, unimproved property. We're not going to discuss farm and ranch, but we are going to talk about third-party financing, notice of termination, amendment of contract, and seller financing. The 1 to 4 family, this is the most probably used contract for residential realtors. I've gone over this before, but I think by repeating myself, you'll probably have no more questions about how to fill out a 1 to 4 family contract, because they're going to move some things from the contract to third-party financing. So the sum of all financing described in the text, third-party financing addendum, loan assumption addendum, seller financing. Apparently they're going to take out below excluding any loaning fee or mortgage insurance premium, and they're going to add license holder disclosure. In other words, if you own part of the property, or you have an interest, or you have a friend that's buying it, let's say a relative, make sure you disclose that information. The financing and third-party financing, that's all going to be moved to third-party financing addendum. And on the second page, 2 of 9, the assumption and seller financing will be moved to third-party financing. On the next page, 3 of 9. 3 of 9 is, it appears to be not too many changes except for the date at the top. 4 of 9, notice of water level fluctuations. I covered this before. If you're selling property around Lake Houston or Lake Travis or Lake Conroe, I think it would probably affect you, but I don't think we're around large, you know, it says 5,000 acre-feet of impoundment, so I don't think we're close to that yet. You got some retention ponds and detention ponds in Oyster Creek, but I don't think you're going to have to worry about that for right now. Any hydrostatic testing, and I went over that before in the last class, and if you want to Google that, that's fine. Lender required repairs, who's responsible for lender required repairs?
Nobody.
Neither. Lender required repairs and treatments unless otherwise agreed in writing. Neither party is obligated to pay for lender required repairs. I would say more, say 60 or 70% of the times, maybe 80% of the time, the seller will probably end up doing it. But I've had a situation where the seller didn't have any money to make repairs, so the buyer had to make the lender required repairs. On page 5 of 9, it looks like last time we discussed this change contract 1 to 4 family on the closing, it mentioned that they were going to put in X days. It says only before the closing date, buyer may extend the closing up to 10 days by giving notice to the seller if buyer's lender is required to provide additional disclosures mandated by the Tiller RESPA integrated disclosure rule. Well, it looks like to me they've drawn a line through it, so I don't know. I'm waiting in January to see if they're going to have this automatic extension. And even if they do, I would suggest getting amendment to contracts so that all parties will be aware that there is extension from the original date of the contract in 1 to 4 family. But if they leave it, well then, or take it out, I'd suggest getting an amendment so everybody's on the same page. Number 9.5, it says if the property is subject to a residential lease, it says acquire the property and they took out and received a security deposit. And you can read the rest of that on your own. Page 6 of 9, special provisions. Special provisions, the insert only factual statements and business details applicable to the sale. Trek rules prohibit license holders. You're going to see license holders instead of licensees. And down at settlement 12.2, expenses payable by buyer. Appraisal fees, loan application fees adjusted, so they're going to delete adjusted. And casualty loss, they're going to add the words if permitted by seller's insurance carrier. Page 7 of 9, damages. They used to have 3 times the amount of earnest money, but they're going to apparently delete that. It says damages any party who wrongfully fails to refuse to sign a release acceptable to the escrow agent, which would be your title company, within 7 days to receive the request to be liable for other party for liquidated. They're going to take that out. I'm just going to put for damages, and then the amount equal to sum of 3 times. They're going to take that out. Notices. I'd like to put in the buyer's address and information, and as I've discussed this in previous classes, put the information in there so that the title company can notify them in case something comes up.
I have a question on the back to D. That line they're taking out about 3 times the amount of damage. That means it's now negotiable if there's damages. So it could be 5 times, could be whatever.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Negotiable.
We'll probably cross that bridge when you start suing for specific performance of a contract or suing for earnest money. I'm going to go over how to get back the earnest money from after the X number of days in third-party financing. I'll go over that, and there's 2 people in the office that's used this plan to get earnest money back the day before closing. So I'll go over that with you. That doesn't mean you're going to get it back. It may end up in the state, but anyway, I'll give you some. I'll show you how to get the earnest money back, even if you're at the X number of days in third-party financing. Okay, at the bottom it shows the phone number and fax. I don't think anybody ever uses a fax machine, but
You did the other day.
I was trying to the other day. I was trying to use my long distance code, and somehow I'm gonna have to reinstate my long distance code. Anyway, they changed a little bit on notices. On the next page of 809, third-party financing for credit approval, they deleted that. And of course, when does the option period, or the 10-day, when does it end? At midnight?
5.
It ends at 5 o'clock. That's right. Y'all are reading. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It says termination option.
Class.
Right, it says notices under this paragraph must be given by 5 p.m. local time where at the property is located at the date specified. So, and also under item 24, it says license holders instead of licensees, and it says if you have a buyer's attorney or seller's attorney, make sure you put that in there. When you're getting the contract, this is the way I do it. when I'm the listing agent and a buyer's agent, we've agreed to everything, and I tell them to bring me the earnest money and the option money. I don't want the option money to be floating around for 3 or 4 days, because if it goes after 3 days, then you don't have an option. So I just tell them to bring me the option money and earnest money, and I have the seller date the contract. I have the seller to date the option, a date, and the amount. And I have the seller, of course, sign the contract. So I want to keep that monkey off my back. I don't want them to come back to me and say, "Oh, Wayne, you dated it 4 days later." I said, "No, I didn't. You did." So I don't want to have any problems with dates, because the dates of the contract affects a lot of things in the contract, starting with the option period and so on. So that's the way I do it. You can do it any way you want to. I've dealt with buyers from Dallas that were buying a house here, and they were attorneys, and they said, "Well, we're going to send everything to the title company." I go, "Okay, you're the attorney." And so everything worked out. But I just like to do it my way. And it's just a little old-fashioned, but I get it done right, and there's no problems. So, but you're independent contractors. You can do it any way you want. Notice on page 9 of 9.
I got a question before we move on to 9 of 9.
Mhm.
Down at the bottom there where you put the executed date,
Right.
I'm finding that just about every kind of, whether I'm representing the buyer or seller, I'm filling that out regardless, because it tends to get missed all the time.
Right.
Is
But
it-
you know, usually, let's just say you signed a contract. What's today? Wednesday. And the sellers are out of town.
I
You're
know.
representing the buyer, and they come back in town on Friday.
Right.
I would talk to your listing agent to make sure that that contract is dated Friday, because if you have a 7-day option period, you only got 4 or 5 more days left. So who handles it last?
No, I mean the execution date on the contract.
I understand that.
You fill
I'm
it
just
in.
wondering, pardon me?
You fill it in.
Well, I've been finding
it's not there.
that whether I do the contract or not, I'm the one that's always filling this in, because nobody. it
I
always gets
understand
missed.
that, I understand that. So, but if you've given so say you gave me the contract today, and it's dated, but I don't have a seller's signature on it.
No, I understand that. I'm just wondering what's a good best practice of
The
making sure
good
this
best
gets
practice
done.
is,
Before it
if
goes
I'm
to
the
the
listing
title company,
agent,
it has to
I'm
be
gonna have it signed by the seller. If I'm the buyer's agent, you have to really, hopefully that the listing agent will do his job.
But they don't.
I understand that.
But it needs to, it gets to the title company, and the title company will send you a receipted contract. So if the receipted contract does not have a date, then you make that correction and have them receipt it
Yeah, I
again.
know. I'm just trying to think of ways to
So-
make it quickly.
Right now, the commercial contracts is the effective date, is the same date that you give them the earnest money. And I like for them to change this wording so that you don't have to plug in the effective
Yeah,
date.
that
When you
makes
get it
sense.
to the title company, that is the effective date in commercial contracts, but not in residential. And I agree with you, a lot of times the effective dates are left out. And so when does the option period start?
The day they said yes.
Yeah.
I accept your offer.
Okay, does that answer your question, Todd? What do you have?
Well, Christina and I were talking about this the other day, that I had the listing, I was representing the seller, and the buyer's agent brought me the contract, but when he got here, he didn't have all the addendums. And so,
Like addendums like what?
well, like the third-party financing, the
Okay.
HOA addendum, he didn't
Okay,
have any of
well,
that stuff with him.
Well,
And
just-
so-
you really just have to hold off.
So it's not effective until you have all
The
that
whole
stuff,
package.
right?
Well, I went over that in previous classes on what a valid contract is. And they don't mention anything about addendums.
They don't? Oh.
Just the earnest money.
As legally speaking, no. But what I would do in that situation is, I'm glad you brought the contract. Tell me when you're gonna bring the addendums. You can email them, fax them, send them by smoke signals, whatever, and get them attached to the contract and make sure they're signed and dated. And then we'll proceed.
But if they indicated that it's part of the contract here, then that would mean that if you don't have it, then it's an incomplete contract, wouldn't it?
Legally speaking, I went over this before on the last session, that and have y'all taken a legal update? Well, take legal update, and I got a whole big thick book of it in here from legal update, and I'll give you what the attorney interprets a contract. And they don't say about addendums, they don't have check-off boxes or anything like that. I'll be more than happy to bring that to you again. But if I was the listing agent, I would have all the paperwork and the earnest money and the option money. If you don't have all the paperwork, call me later. Email it to me, fax it to me, whatever. Then you can proceed. But I would not proceed unless you had all the paperwork, even though you had the boxes checked off. Sometimes I'd only check the boxes. So that's the way I do it, yeah.
You mentioned you can send smoke signals. What happens if my fire burns out?
Well, you're
If it's rainy
SOL.
day.
Surely out of luck. Okay, we're gonna go to the next one. Resale condominium contract. Down at the bottom, it says BD, if the documents reveal the property is subject to right of first refusal, you know, that's what the HOA has the right to buy. I really don't like first right of refusals. I don't never seen that in the residential, because who's got the right of first refusal, but in the condominium project, they may have the right of first refusal. So just go along with what the HOA and the contract, they do have the first right of refusal in some of those situations, depending on what your deed restrictions are and what they've set up. Okay, next is sales price. Now, in this one particular contract, it's just basically almost the same thing as 1 to 4, because y'all will be selling some condominiums from time to time. License holder disclosure, I've talked about that. It says Texas law requires a real estate license holder is a party to a transaction or acting on behalf of spouse, parent, child, business entity in which the license holder owns more than 10% of the trust, or which the license holder acts as trustee. Then you have to disclose that. Now, if you're representing your cousin, your brother, a relative, I would disclose that in the contract in special provisions. Or you can disclose it right there. Okay, probably be best to disclose it right there when they come out with the new contracts. Special provisions, it seemed like to me years ago the special provisions are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think in certain subdivisions like Riverstone and Santa Plantation, where they have foundation fees at 1/2 a point, 1/4 of a point, and cap fees, I think you ought to explain that. Who's paying for what in that transaction? Because if not, you're going to have some misunderstandings at closing. These things are deleted down here in title policy. It states in there item 6.3 that goes from 3 to 4, so or 4 to 3. Anyway, the page 3 of 9 talked about the water level fluctuations. We covered that in the 1 to 4. Hydraulic testing must be separately authorized by seller. That's was in the previous ones, and it also looks like to me they're taking out the 10-day extension at the bottom of closing, and that's just kind of a repeat. And let's see, item 5, page 5 of 9, acquired the property, and they've taken out and received the security deposit. And then special provisions, they talk about license holder instead of licensee. There's just not a whole lot of room, as you see in special provisions, to write certain things. Well, I'd like to have the seller provide a clean certificate of compliance with no conditions. I also like to say that the owner will pay for the foundation fees and or any resale certificates, depending on what you're if you're representing the buyer, I want to make sure the seller will pay for certain things. So they're really cutting back on special provisions. So anyway, expenses payable to buyers, expenses, appraisal fees, loan application fees are taken out, adjusted. The next page of 609, and permitted by seller's insurance carrier. And damages any party that's taken out to 3 times the damages. So anyway, the last page 709, and it says notices. I like to put the buyer's name. If I'm representing the buyer, I like to put, or if I'm representing the owner, I like to put the seller's name in the contract for notices for the title company. Ask the title company, so when they send out notices, they want to make sure that they have their email address, and some of you guys are going to have to share it. That's all you're going to have to do for right now. an agreement of parties, they've taken out third-party finance and addendum for credit approval. And a termination, you know, when it ends at 5 o'clock rather than 12. And they got down here license holders for the licensees. And if you have the buyer's or seller's attorney, make sure you put that in there. And we talked about dating the contract. You know, hopefully that if you're representing the buyer, the listing agent will have the contract dated. If I'm the listing agent, I've already gone through those scenarios, get the earnest money, option money, and have the seller date the contract, and put the effective date in, option amount, and of course sign the contract. And as it says right here, it says seller or listing broker. Well, I don't want to be responsible for that, so I just have the seller sign here. And the receipt of X dollars in the form of probably a check. Unimproved property contract, sales price.
I'm sure this is a dumb question, but, you know.
There is no dumb question.
Especially
This
because
one
you would
probably
not
really
know.
is. This one it probably really is. But
Okay.
if I have a client that wants to buy 4.
Wait a minute, wait, hold on for a second. When you ask a question, when it says, if you have a buyer's representation agreement, information about broker service, and notice to buyer signed, they are considered a client. If you have none of that paperwork, they're considered a customer. And if you have customers, you can refer those to Todd. Okay, go ahead. Now, do you have a customer or a client?
I forgot what my question was.
No, you have a customer. You have a customer that wants to buy a fourplex.
How do you know it's a customer? I have a client who wants to buy
Oh,
4 units. It's not a fourplex.
okay,
For individual?
It's 4 separate condos,
right.
all in the same
It's
building.
called a fourplex. Okay.
No,
No,
They're not, they're not connected.
Condominium, but
Condominium,
they want
I
like
want
4
buy
of the
4 units.
units in the condominium.
They're not connected. They used to be apartments, okay? Think about apartments and
Four-
condos.
Okay, so they converted the apartments to condos.
Mhm.
So
So it's
they're
four-
not, the apartments are not connected?
It's 4 individual units.
Oh, in this one building?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe. Might be in 2 different buildings.
No, I don't know, but the ones you looked at on, on Loop, were they connected? You had the pictures, were they connected with, is it one building or 4 buildings?
Does it matter?
I don't think it
That's
matters.
what I'm saying. Does it matter?
Well, you have a seller's disclosure for one.
Not your question.
You have another seller's disclosure for the second one. You may have to have a seller's
You're
disclosure.
probably wondering if I need to do one contract or 4.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to.
Is it so same owner or different owners?
It's all the same owner,
Okay.
4 completely separate condos.
Yeah, and then one contract, and then you put down unit number 1, unit number 9, 11,
Yeah, okay.
13.
I thought it was a dumb question.
No,
Okay.
I think
as
that's a
long as
great
it goes to
question.
the
I would
same,
have done 4 separate
depend on
contracts.
the seller. If you have separate.
Well, if you have,
seller,
if it's all one building, you could probably use 1 to 4 family contract.
Okay, is that why you were asking
Or
that?
condominium
1 to 4
contract.
Oh, 1 to 4 family, really?
Excuse me, slow down. 1 to, yeah, condominium.
Okay,
Condominium.
And you can probably use just 1 contract for the condominium.
okay. Well,
Excuse
I
me.
figured it was a dumb question.
No.
No, that was good, actually.
Unimproved, but I just wanted to, you know, when you start asking people questions, you know, I think it's good when you say, everyone says client, well, most people are not clients, they're just customers. So, you know, it's just like going into to buy something at a store, you're usually a customer.
I know, you were just picking on me, using me for an example.
I'm just trying to be, you know, you have a customer or a client. If you have a client, great. If you have a customer, refer those to Nyla and Christina.
Stop.
Anyway, just having a little fun. Unimproved property. Okay, so basically it's the same in the attached third-party addendum, loan assumption addendum, seller financing addendum. License holder disclosure, we've talked about that. We've taken out the financing, third-party financing. They're going to move everything to the third-party financing addendum. Okay, page 2 of 8, basically the same except for one small little change at the top. Page 3 of 8, and notice the water level fluctuations. Now, they've taken out, obviously, they've taken out number 7, hydraulic, because it's the unimproved property. So, I mean, why have this test? So, I mean, I'm glad they're taking it out, because it probably wouldn't, you know, they probably wouldn't be affected for this. because it's vacant property. And then they're gonna leave it in or take it out about the 10-day extension for the tiller RESPA integrated disclosure rule. We'll find out, because the last one I talked about was in there. And the special provisions is license holders instead of licensees, adjusted. And got in here for prorations and rollback taxes. Y'all understand what rollback taxes are. When a person has, say, 100 acres or 500 acres or 1,000 acres, they may have it for ag exemptions. The taxes on ag exemptions is about 10% of the total. I mean, it's really, real reasonable. But then once they sell it, if I was selling and then they want to convert it immediately to commercial, say subdivision or whatever, the seller may have to be faced with rollback taxes for at least 3 years. I've heard it from 3 to 5, but so they'll have quite a bit to pay at closing. Now, if the buyer comes in and changes it, say a year later, then they may have to pay some rollback taxes. So depending on when they change the exemption, you know, at closing or just prior to a day or two or after.
Now, can you, well, no, you can't. I was gonna say, you can increase the sales price to offset some of the
Rollback tax.
but it might not appraise if it was used.
Well, if it's, yeah, because most of the acreage that I handled, when the 60s to the 80s, it was a landowner finance, so.
Yeah.
Because banks don't like to loan money on raw land.
I would think it would appraise out the way you negotiate.
So, right, so there wasn't any appraisals done when I was selling most of the acreage. It was mostly landowner finance, X% down, and owner finance. And anyway, prorations and rollback taxes, assessments are imposed because of the seller's use or change. It says right here, if assessments are imposed because of the seller's use or change in the use of the property prior to closing, then they may have to. Then it states in there that the assessments will be obligation of the seller, obligations imposed by the seller will survive closing. So it depends whether it says after or prior. It says after closing results in the assessment, the buyer, and then if it's prior to, it's the seller. Okay? So, and then of course at the bottom it's permitted by seller's insurance carrier. The next page is 609. Damages, they're taking out to 3 times the earnest money. And I've got phone and fax. Don't forget to put your notices in there, buyer and seller. Termination, they still got the same thing here. When does the termination time end? At 5 o'clock.
4 o'clock now, just wait.
You're trying to confuse me. Come on now. You guys are picking on me. Pam says, pick on Wayne. Anyway.
On us enough.
One thing to think there is, it has it expires at 5 p.m. local time.
Yes.
So remember, if you have an out-of-state buyer that's buying, it happens to be
It's
back
the local.
home.
Right, it's here.
It's here.
Right, wherever the property is located.
Right.
Right. So, also on the broker information, they've changed it around a little bit. They've moved the telephone number down to the bottom to the right. They just made some minor changes there. And they've taken out the mason mill. So, anyway, don't forget, if you're the listing agent, make sure you get the option fee signed by the seller if you want to. Put the option amount, have the contract signed, and don't forget to have the seller's signature. Yeah.
I got a question
Sure.
about that termination option period, but it doesn't really relate to this kind of contract, but does it matter?
No, fire away.
Fire away.
Well, on commercial property, investment type property, it seems that a lot of people that own that kind of property won't allow anybody to come inside and look at it. They want you to make an offer, and then if your offer's accepted, well then you get a period where you can go inside and look.
Feasibility period. But the main thing is that it's all about the numbers. So if you can provide the cash flow and the cap rate,
Yeah,
then you don't need to see the inside. The value, yeah, the value is in the numbers.
okay, well, I hear what you're saying there. I'm just saying I'm dealing with somebody that this is probably the first piece of investment property they've ever bought, so they don't understand all that.
So they should buy their own and then lease it out themselves since they're very nervous.
No, but they don't wanna make that, you mean lease first and then buy it later?
See, right now they're looking at properties that are already occupied and they're not able to see the inside. So you can do it, you can back it, or you can turn it around and say, okay, since you really wanna know what you're buying, you can buy the property and I'll find you the tenant. That, I hate that way, but that's,
Well, it's
That's-
already occupied and it's a long-term lease.
But the listing
It's-
agent slash owner doesn't want the buyer to look at the
he
inside?
doesn't want you to disturb the tenant.
Because they don't wanna disturb the tenants and they probably get who knows how many calls every day wanting to look at it, so they don't wanna disturb them, 15 times a day.
But
So
maybe
they
make
say
that
you have
deal.
to make an offer, if accepted, then you get a period where you can come inside and look at it. And,
Let me let
If
you
it
know.
were me, I would just take my client over there, go into the business and just work up a conversation with whoever's running there, and they'll probably work with you.
Let me let you
Even though
know.
they're gonna say, don't do it, I would do it anyway, if you have to.
No,
You know how normal that is? Let me show you how normal.
take
no,
them inside,
honestly,
though?
no.
No.
See,
Wrong has
the best
already
way
been
will
I
be,
can,
the
I
best
can't
way
take them
will be,
inside if they say no.
You can't.
it's a violation,
It is.
Yeah.
Because then you could lose
it's
the
a
tenant.
violation.
But then
Yeah,
they could go in on their own.
Usually I
you have to stand
ask
in the
my
corner for
people
that
to
comment.
go there. They want to
Put
buy
them
a
in
wash
timeout.
area, so they just go
As a
there.
customer,
Yeah, as
it's
a
different.
customer.
As a
Yeah,
customer,
and then occasionally check with the manager.
no,
No.
because let me tell you,
Can't worms here.
don't think we are only the smartest people.
No.
They
Okay.
are.
Immediately the manager, if they inform, you are in trouble.
Ah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what is the best legal way is put an offer with a contingency.
Correct.
Ah,
In that
okay.
period.
Okay?
It's kind of like an
Okay,
option
okay,
period.
okay.
So
Ah.
that is the best way,
Yeah.
put an
I see.
offer with a contingency
Ah.
that, see, in any commercial
What
transaction.
they
numbers
call
are
that-
very important.
Hey,
The
we're
thing
gonna
is,
end this,
the
what they
price.
call that is they call it a feasibility study. So
Correct.
we're gonna jump to something else, cause
Okay, I knew
y'all
I
don't
should
deal
probably
in,
better
I'll tell you
question
what,
later.
when you're dealing in commercial properties,
Todd and I are
you
gonna
better
stay
know
in
what
class.
you're doing.
Right.
And if you're not familiar with commercial properties,
Refer
I
them to Don.
refer them to Don.
That's all you
Well, I was
got.
gonna refer him to.
There is another
Robert,
name
but he's
also.
on vacation.
Yes. Don't forget.
That's right, Patel, yes, or Robert, they deal in commercials, so I mean, but if you want to go ahead and do it, hey, you're an
See,
independent
smallest
contractor.
mistake
Yeah.
will put you in a big trouble, that I can tell you.
Okay,
But see, the thing
let's-
is, you give them an offer, they accept. How do you know this is the right offer you give it to them?
Because during that feasibility period, you still got the negotiation room, so you can say,
See,
you can
it
say,
is-
I didn't know it had this, now I need you to contribute this towards repairs.
Ah.
You can calculate NPV.
Well, he
Okay.
said to,
This is a residential class.
no, well, yeah, no, he said to put it on, how do you
Shut
call
up.
that? No. He said to hold your thought.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, hold on for a second, we can talk about commercial in the next episode or next class.
She wants you to teach more classes.
I know. Okay, the third-party financing, this is real important. Third-party financing, it looks like to me that they've taken a few things out, like adjusted. This is the third-party financing. And down at the bottom it says buyer approval. And this contract is subject to buyer obtaining buyer approval. If the buyer cannot obtain buyer approval, buyer may give notice to seller within X days. So what would be the good amount to put in there? 15 to 20 days?
30,
Depends on who you're working
35 on the contract.
Some would say 20, some say 15, some say 30. So I mean, you're all independent contractors, and then with the new rules with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, TRID, and RESPA, and all that, you on closing, the closing date, you might put at least 45 to 60 days on closing, because it's going to take more time. And don't forget when they say closing, ready to close, clear to close, it's that plus 72 hours. So be prepared for some delays. Okay, we're gonna,
So what's the number of days to put in here, Wayne? I must have missed it.
20 to 35 days.
Okay.
Again, it is negotiable how the listing agent acts on that.
20 to 30.
Well, if it's a loan involved, everything is negotiable. The fill in the blanks are negotiable.
Third-party finance.
So I'm just,
Financing, 20 to 35 days.
so, anyway, it's at the very bottom of this one right here.
20
It's
to,
very at the bottom of the page.
20 to
Wayne,
35.
you need to slow down for some of us slower people.
Okay,
Thank you.
If you got, but you gotta quit thinking commercial, come back.
right.
No,
We'll
no,
come back to residential, because I'm not gonna do commercial.
no.
If you want a commercial class, you can talk to Don,
Now,
or
you, me, and Todd.
Patel, or you can talk to Robert. Anyway, it's residential, I tell you what, it's complicated enough. And I did raw land for 20 years, and it's changed. A lot of people don't understand minerals and royalties, and so, but that's another class. Anyway, X number of days right here at the bottom. I'd say 20 to 30. Sometimes they might say, well, I know a loan officer that can close in 15 days. Okay, everything's negotiable. It states down here at the bottom that the contract is subject to buyer obtaining X number of days. It says after the effective date of this contract will terminate. See, that's why I say after the effective date. Well, if that effective date is blank,
Yeah, you're screwed up.
what, you know, everything goes by the effective date. So if you're representing the buyers, you know, you're probably not going to put the effective date in here. It's just tell the listing agent, make sure the effective dates in the contract before they drop the earnest money off and give it to, or sometimes they'll have the an agent from the title company like Stewart or whoever could come in here and they pick up the contracts and you got the earnest money attached to it in an envelope and it's not dated. Well, maybe you can get the agent from the title company to date the contract and sign off on the earnest money. I don't know if they can or not. I don't do that. I take it to the title company. I'm old-fashioned. I've got the seller's signature, I got the earnest money, I got the option money, and as soon as I take it to the seller, I give them the option money, and then I hold on to the earnest money, and I take it to the title company. If y'all want to have someone come by and pick it up, that's fine. It just breaks today. I run over there and get it all signed. Everything is dated. Okay, we're going to go. It says buyer does not terminate the contract on this provision. The contract shall no longer be subject to buyer obtaining buyer approval. It says nothing about loan approval. It says buyer approval, and even the old ones it said credit approval. So it has, you know, an approval would be deemed to have been approved within the terms of the loan described above or available, and assets, income, credit. If buyer cannot obtain credit, okay, they've just changed it out a little bit. Now, go down a little bit further. It says the contract is not subject to the buyer obtaining buyer credit approval. Buyer approval. Okay.
You know, Wayne, the reason they're doing that is because this whole document is for third-party finance. So it is finance approval. They're just trying to take out as many words as possible.
I know, but it says for buyer approval. And they've taken out the credit approval.
Right.
But they don't, but it's not named loan approval.
But this is a third-party financing
For
addendum, so
finance.
it's redundant, is what he's
So they're
saying.
saying, the other is just buyer approval. You're saying whether it gets approved by finance. But this whole
Approval
thing-
will be deemed to have been obtained when A, the term of the loan described above are available, and B, lender determines that buyer has satisfied all lender requirements related to buyer's assets.
So it still
income, and
means the
credit.
same thing. They just shortened the words into it.
But they moved it from 1 to 4 to third party.
Yeah.
That's all they did. But now let's just go down to property approval. Property approval may be deemed to have been obtained when the property has satisfied lender's underwriting requirements for the loan, including but not limited to appraisal. Well, let's just say you put in, say, 25 to 30 days in third-party financing, and the appraisal is not ordered till the 40th day, and the appraisal is short. Can you terminate the contract and get your earnest money back? Yes. Okay, insurability. Insurability, okay, let me give you some examples of insurability. Let's just say there's a storm, hurricane in the Gulf. Well, they may not be writing policies that day. So your closing may get delayed. And let's just say the buyer doesn't want to extend the closing. Well, can't get insurance. You can say, well, that's not my fault. So he may be able to terminate the contract and get his earnest money back.
Somebody.
Lender required repairs. Who's responsible for lender required repairs?
Neither.
Neither. And if the property approval is not obtained by the date of closing, it says right here, if the property approval is not obtained, buyer may terminate this contract by giving notice to seller before closing. Could be a day before closing. And the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. Now, these are the things I talked about: storms, insurability. If you had storm in the Gulf, you've had a lot of claims on the property, or the physical condition of the property. If you're going to try to get your earnest money back after the X number of days that you've gone past, or a day before closing, or 2 days before closing, make sure you get the denial letter from the mortgage company, a right to terminate and release of earnest money.
Can we make them switch lenders? If we think their lender is just being extra conservative?
Or you extend the contract.
Yeah, extend it.
Extend the closing, you may have to extend the closing, but, you know, if you're dealing with a buyer that really doesn't want the property, is an unmotivated buyer,
Yeah.
that may be an out, just to get out, you know. Now, if he's still motivated,
Yeah, it's
hey, you know, maybe he's still excited about buying the property. He says, hey, you can send me to another mortgage sale. Hey, let's do that. I really want that property. My brother lives next door, so I really want that property.
So he forfeits the right to the earnest money after he agrees to extend beyond that, right?
Only if it's in the contract.
Let's say it again.
If you
Like if the buyer does not get approved by this one initial lender, and now he decides, well, I'm gonna switch lenders,
and
does that same rule still apply as far as, okay,
It
because
doesn't.
if the second lender said, well, no, we can't
That's
approve you.
negotiable.
That's right. So he can still get out of the contract.
And get his earnest.
It doesn't state in there about
I'm
changing.
talking about the earnest money.
I understand.
So he still
Yeah.
has
Get the
the
earnest
right.
money back.
So what you would do is extend it.
Now, let me
and then
explain
it still
something to
carries
you.
over.
Hold on for a second. Now, we're gonna get the denial letter, the right to terminate and release of earnest money. Now, the title company won't release the earnest money unless the release of earnest money is signed.
by both parties.
Now, let's just say you're dealing with me, and I want your earnest money, and you've done everything you're supposed to do. Well, I refuse to sign it, and then now on the contract it says you can notify the title company and make a demand for earnest money. Now, if I don't say anything after 15 days, the title company can issue that check to the buyer if I don't say anything within those 15 days. But let's just say a seller says, oh, I'm making a demand too. Well, it may have been in the state treasury, because you're going to fight over some earnest money. And so I really don't like earnest money. I'd rather for you just give me $100 and give me $1,000 for option. And I've done it in the past. When they first started having these option things, there were 3 buyers on the house, and so I said, do you really want this property? He says, yes, I do. My cousin lives on one side, and my brother lives on the other, and I want to be right in the middle. So well, give me 1,000 earnest and 1,000 option, and you can get the house. So let's see if anybody else wants to match that. And nobody else matched it. You got the house. And did we have any problems with the inspections or repairs? I don't think so. So they bought the property, and they were real happy with the property. So I'm not too impressed by someone putting up $5,000 or $10,000 earnest money. I'm more interested if they put up quite a bit of option money, because it's non-refundable. Yeah.
But again, that refund of earnest money is governed by the third party addendum where the number of days is mentioned.
And then after the number of days, let me ask you something. You put in there 20 days, say.
Yeah.
On the 25th day, you just got the appraisal, and it's short. Can I get my earnest money back?
Yes.
Well, let's just say there's a storm in the Gulf, and they're not writing insurance, and we're supposed to close tomorrow. Can I get my earnest money back?
Yes.
Yes.
No, but,
say there's repairs,
yeah,
and you're refusing to do the repairs, the seller isn't not. So I can't get the loan because the lender says you need to get these repairs done before we close. What's the question?
so only this is all done in before the end of the duration.
No, it's done before the closing. It has nothing to do with the number of days from the third-party
No.
financing.
Appraisal is generally done as soon as the inspection is okay. No
Different
buyer,
lenders,
no
some lenders
buyer,
wait till the last minute to do that.
generally no buyer charge the credit card till the option period and the inspection.
The option period is over. Okay, let's just say the 10-day option period is over. He's lost that option money, X dollars, whatever it is, $200 to $500. Because I don't think anybody in this office has charged anybody over $500 for option. Usually it's about $200 to $250, depending on the sales price. The earnest money is put up for X dollars. Usually it's 1% of the sales price. Say it's $1,000 for a $100,000 house. And you're past the number of days in third-party financing, and you're the day before closing. Okay, there's 2 agents in the office that had those 3 things done to get the earnest money back for the buyer. And those 3 things are the denial letter from the mortgage company, write that down, the right to terminate and release of earnest money, and they got their earnest money back. Does that
In your
answer your
scenario,
question?
you're better off to give a low option fee and a high earnest money. When
No.
you said you'd rather
No.
take the high option fee,
Right, but does that answer your question?
If appraisal is done, appraisal is okay, other than
No, no. If the appraisal's okay, the appraisal's been done, okay.
appraisal is okay,
Right.
repairs is, there is no issue.
Okay, and no problems with the insurance?
No problem with the insurance.
But no, wait a minute, hold on for a second. Then it says the words, but not limited to. So there may be, this is just an example.
wait a minute, finish your statement because you lost me
Yeah.
now.
So suppose there is 21 days for third party finance. And this all is done, and this is nothing to do with, but the mortgage company says that now you are not approved.
Then they get the money back.
No, then they don't get.
No, they get it,
No.
because
they
they still get it, because even the time has passed,
Then what is the logic of putting 21 days or X days?
I understand that. I understand your question. I understand your question.
And
But,
if it
Now, it would-
means
right,
the mortgage broker or the lender has not done the proper work, he has dropped the ball by issuing the pre-approval.
the buyer
letter.
could drop the ball too.
Right,
turning
and
it
why
down.
the seller should be penalized by putting the property off market for?
I
this?
said
Well,
that I told you there's two ways to get the earnest money back. Three, you had to do the 3 things. This is after the X number of days, and this is prior to closing.
That's why we really have to do all we can when we accept an offer by
Now,
calling that lender.
you may want the earnest money. I'm the buyer, I may want the earnest money. We're gonna fight over it, and it may end up going to the state. Now, let's just say it takes 6 months. Now, here's what I'm gonna do to give you a hard time. I'm gonna file a les pendants. You know what that is?
I don't.
Nobody knows what a les pendants is. Google it.
I forgot.
No, miss, where?
And wait a
where
minute,
the
hold on for
seller-
a second. I've clouded the title to your property, and you will not be able to sell that property to anybody
Until you release that.
unless you give me the release.
Mhm.
Or, if I want to make a demand and you're making the demand for earnest money, you won't be able to sell that property till you get that contract away, because I've clouded
The title, that's what we call it, clouding the
Is
title.
it the less pendants that clouds the title? So
No,
that-
just the contract itself. But when you want to sue for something and you want to tie somebody up, you can sue and you have a less pendants.
But if you cloud the title, can they go to a different title company instead of?
Oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Good. I'm going to mail the copies of my contract to all the title companies in Sugar Land and Houston. Return receipt requested. Now what are you going to do?
Now,
Go ahead, Steve.
No,
No, you don't
the
have to.
seller is really tough. He will make sure that you are technically wrong on your expecting the release of earnest money because of the third party addendum. And believe me, you are inviting a very good lawsuit to you.
Oh, yeah, he can sue you to purchase.
No, not only purchase.
Uh-huh.
For all the losses,
Uh-huh.
for the house which
Three
was on the
times.
market.
He used to pay 3 times.
So if you are ready, go cloud it.
Okay, but hey, does your seller wanna sell the house?
Yep.
See,
So
anyway, he's
I
covered.
understand
We're
that.
gonna
The
pay
day
you
you-
go away.
But wait a minute, hold on for a second, let's just say he's out of money and he needs to sell the house.
Sir, the day you cloud it, as per third party addendum, his house is already, he has
Okay.
money,
Hey,
more
I'll tell
than
you
what he
what.
was expecting.
Tell you what, we're all independent contractors.
Do
You
what
can,
you
you
like.
can handle it any way you want to, okay? So I've been able to suggest to a couple of agents in the office on how to get the earnest money back, and they got the earnest money back after the number of days, X number of days in third-party financing, and one day before closing.
See, other points are 100% legitimate, like insurance is not covering, or repairs issue is there, or it is not appraised, that are legitimate.
That's just examples, it's not limited to those. It's, you can limit to anything.
No, I understand, but those are legitimate, but now the only lender says now he's not approved. Then believe me, it's between lender and the buyer.
Okay, hey, you're an independent contractor, you can do anything you want to.
But I
I'm just
don't
trying to
believe,
give you
Hmm?
some examples of
Sorry?
what we did to get the earnest money back for the buyer.
I don't believe when they say they're not approved,
Use the word.
I wanna try my lender.
I got one
Make
little
sure.
question on,
You didn't raise your hand, Todd.
Him as the regulator.
man, I'm gonna be having to stay out for a long time.
Okay,
Okay, so, on the scenario you used a little while ago about, my client didn't qualify. I sent in the proper documentation, you didn't sign it, you get your seller to sign it, so they're trying to keep the option money. I sent it in.
No, earnest money.
Earnest money. I sent it into title with a demand, and you have 15 days to reply, right? Is there a form that you use in that 15 days, or do you just,
Just
Email.
write it in, just put it in your email,
Okay.
or, but I would send, I would draw it up in your letterhead. I know everyone has stationery here, right?
yeah, it's called
Email.
Microsoft.
No, I'm serious. Emails are important, but I'd send it return
Yeah,
receipt request. Okay? And bar Don's stationery. Oh, let's get going, because, now this is real, what?
Can you list those 3 things again just one more time, because I didn't have my pencil out.
It's on that page. It's on that page in the post.
Some of them not. Denial letter, right to terminate, release earnest money.
Now letter,
Did we offend?
Right of termination. I'm gonna get to that in just a second.
right to terminate, and what was the third one? Denial letter.
Release of
right to
earnest money.
terminate.
What do you say?
Release of earnest money.
Release of earnest money.
Okay, now, let's get going here on this, this one right here, and these are the same
What's that
thing.
called?
This is called
This is-
authorization to furnish tiller RESPA integrated disclosures. This is real important.
Okay.
So when you have a listing on a piece of property, that person becomes a client. To make sure that he has, make sure all the paperwork's done, and add this to your listing package. And when you're working with a buyer, he's not a customer, he's a client, because you're gonna have the buyer's rep sign information about broker services, notice to buyer tenant, and this new authorization. Because it may or may not be in the new contracts. They put it in the new contracts and then they took it out for the authorization. I don't know if you caught that or not when we're going through these contracts. But it looks like to me they were gonna put it in, and then they got a line drawn out. So, just to cover yourself and also to get funding, sometimes they won't send you the CD without this.
This goes to the title company?
It says right here, the lender, title company, and escrow agent.
Oh,
Okay, so whoever you're working with, try to get it signed. This one right here is an example. It's on the bulletin board in the back. I just made copies for your convenience.
So this is for all the listings, right?
All the
Everything.
listings and all the buyers.
Everything.
It says
So
right
in
here,
other words, they're
in this
giving
situation right here, the agent was representing the buyer. So guess what? You check the box, buyer.
This is the form you didn't like, remember you said they're gonna, everybody's gonna know our business? This is that one. About to see if, the consumer.
Right,
Yeah.
so you need
You
this,
need this form because
Right.
the title company needs
Won't,
this to send you the
exactly.
CD.
right,
you
and
need
then
the CD,
the
don't
CD, the office procedures, they want the CD, you know.
But
So
if we ever have somebody who won't sign this, we're SO, what, surely out of luck?
That's surely out of luck. So anyway, make sure you get that signed. Okay, the next one is notice the buyer's termination of contract. This is what you need, right here.
Is this like a buyer's representation?
No, it's not a buyer's representation. No, if you put it in you're working with the buyer.
Mhm.
Okay, here's the things you need to work with a buyer. A buyer's representation agreement, information about brokerage services, notice the buyer tenant, and this piece of paper that I just showed you.
This is so the title company can send you their documents.
Yeah,
Yeah,
our
this is
office
yours.
need it.
And it
Okay.
just went in effect October 1st, so that's why you have probably been seeing it in class. It just went into effect October 1st.
Right, and
October 1st,
I've gone on with this 3 or 4 months ago, but no one paid attention because October, they weren't
She
thinking. you
wasn't
know.
here.
Yeah, I know you weren't.
She wasn't here.
I know you weren't.
I've been a realtor for
2 days now.
1.5 months.
Okay, good. Okay, now,
Oh, you're an old hat.
now, the next one here is notice, this is what you have to do right here. See this notice of buyer's termination of contract?
Uh-huh.
It states in here, the buyer cannot obtain buyer credit approval according to third-party finance. In other words, if you, before the X days, Mattel, pronounce it again, M-I-T,
Kapil, Kapil.
Mittal,
Mittal,
Mytel,
Kapil Mittal.
that's a phone
Mittal.
company.
I'll get it straight here, Mittal. Anyway, for the number of days in third-party financing, you use number 2, okay? For buyer approval, use that one, and you get your earnest money back. Okay, that's before the number of days in third-party financing. And number 3, it says the property does not satisfy property approval in accordance with third-party financing to the contract. So I'd use that box right there, right to terminate and release of earnest money. This is the notice of buyer's termination of contract, denial letter, and release of earnest money, okay? Let's go to the next one here. Amendment to contract, they're gonna change a few things. You already know what the option period ends. It ends at 5 o'clock. And I tell you what, if someone brings you the repair list at 5:01, I try to make the deal, because then you have to start all over again with another buyer. So remember 2 things: make the deal, you know, I mean. So, but now let's just say if I was bringing this to you at 4:59 and you're tough, I mean, you do everything as per what, it's 5 o'clock in 1 more minute. So I would,
My name's Wayne Russell.
that's right. This is what I would do.
What would you do?
Now, you have to tell the buyer, says if the seller is refusing to do the repairs after 5 o'clock today, because it's 4:59, then you're buying the property in its present condition. No repairs. You understand that? They got termites, you have to treat it. You got repairs, you got to do it. So, let's just say the buyer says, oh, no, it's 4:59, and here's the amendment to the contract. I would try to extend the closing, notice the buyer's termination right here. I'd give them this too, and state in there, and then you might want to put a little get out clause, like if the seller is willing to do the repairs, then we will avoid the termination. Because if you don't do that, then you're buying the property in its present condition. So there's, you know, I'm just making suggestions. People probably never thought about that, but, you know, let's just say the seller has been out of the country and the buyer's been out of the country, and they both come back at 4:59, you know. So try to protect your buyer. And the seller goes, hey, you know, I was willing to do those repairs if you'd have just got it to me earlier. Well, I could have got it to you earlier, but I just got back from overseas. So, I mean, use judgment and try to make the deal. Seller financing, let's go to this one. Seller financing is a promissory note, an amount of X dollars, including, and then if they took out described, They got paragraph 3B and, they got a 4, and, just small changes in seller financing. On the second page, it's got license holders at the bottom. On the seller's disclosure, real quick like, it's very minor on the first page of seller's disclosure. Seller's disclosure, page 2 of 5, there's hardly any changes in the seller's disclosure. You gotta stay up with me. At the bottom here, any portion of the property is located in groundwater conservation district or substance district. I just happened to pull this up. The Fort Bend Substance District was created in Texas legislature in 1989. The district's purpose is to provide the regulation of withdrawal of groundwater within the district to prevent subsidence that contributes to flooding, inundation, and overflow of areas within the district, including rising waters resulting from storms and hurricanes. So that was the only thing that added, and I added a picture of a crane. Anyway.
Wow, I like it.
This is the 4 of 5 as far as any changes, and 5 of 5. Try to put this information in here, and when you get a listing, try to have the seller put this information in regarding to utilities and things. It's just for convenience and a courtesy. Information about brokerage services. Here's the old one,
We need a new one.
and here's the new one.
This is the new or the old one? Oh, new one.
It says 11/2/2015, so I assume it's pretty new,
Oh,
because
no,
that's
this is new.
today. Oh, well, actually, it's 30 days ago.
Wow.
So,
Wait, hold on, the broker has to sign it?
information about
Yeah,
This document's changed.
Yeah, I see it, the broker has to sign it now.
wow.
Well, you can probably sign for that person. It depends on the office policy. I would check with Jennifer to see if you can just,
To see if we need all 4 signatures.
Oh, no, it says, well,
Yeah,
it don't even say
licensed
signature,
supervisor
it don't
says
even
it.
say signature.
it just
It
says
just says
license.
who they,
Just
it just
hand-
says their information. It does, it's not asking for a signature.
And then the license number.
So you need 1 out of the 4.
1 out of 4?
Oh.
I didn't say that. Don said, don't get me in trouble. And the email and the phone number. I'm gonna put in here everything. I'm gonna try to fill in the blanks. I'm gonna put Don as the designated broker.
You know, I can sign
He's
for
my
you.
supervisor.
I can sign. Martha, I'll charge you.
And it says
And
just
next-
initials. It doesn't
next.
say anything about
Next in the,
signature.
Buyers though, not the.
Yes, buyer, tenant,
Right,
seller,
so-
or landlord
So the
initials.
broker don't have to sign it. It's-
Right, no,
It
I'm
just
not-
need their information.
Yeah.
It's like-
Okay, and then the next one is a residential listing checklist. I just got this, and they've changed a few things, but I just wanted, when you get a listing, you have a checkoff list, and don't forget, when you get the survey,
Interesting.
you get the T47.
Uh-huh.
Because if you just got the survey and the T47, you're gonna have a problem. So get both. If they're gonna provide you with the survey, get the T47. Now, the T47 has to be signed before a notary. So, you know me, I'm old fashioned. If I'm gonna open up a title for someone, I'll just take them to the title company and have it signed.
See, the best collections I've ever had, wheat bread collection.
You have to have the.
Right, there you go.
Coming to the next class.
Next one is, it's said right here, identify the source of square footage. On the second page, hey, slow down just for a second. Yeah.
Too much
It
size.
says identify source of square footage, appraisal district, builder's plans, appraiser reported. Put the, it also says seller. A lot of times the sellers will enclose a room, they say, oh, no, I don't have 3,000 square foot, I have 3,500.
You on this page?
Yeah, this page right here.
You better verify, because it's gonna be a lawsuit.
And,
Right.
and so what are you referring to on that page?
Oh, let's just say you're loading up a listing, and you use this profile sheet here.
Okay,
You can either put appraisal district, or appraisal builder, or seller, but it doesn't state in here seller on this one, but you can put seller when you load the listing, because if the seller says, well, I got 3,500, the appraisal district's wrong, sometimes they've enclosed a room and somehow the permit didn't get to the central appraisal district to raise the taxes, so they just, anyway, but they'll tell you it's 3,500. So if they tell you it's different from the appraisal district, just put in there what they say so they'll be happy. But give the source. Okay, next one is